9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is the DSR Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Deep State Radio once again, for all these many years. And here we are in a deep state. I'm David Rothkopf, your host, and I'm joined by my friends, Rosa Brooks of Georgetown University Law Center. Are you in a deep state, Rosa?
I am in the deep state, David. I'm not going to tell you where I am because it's a secret. And if they torture you, I don't want you to have to give up my location under torture.
Undisclosed location again. Yeah. And Edward G. Luce of the Financial Times. Are you in a deep state of despair, state of confusion? What kind of state?
Not confusion, but definitely something approaching despair. But spring is around the corner. It's no longer chilly in Washington.
Yeah, well, and I'm, of course, therefore not in Washington. I'm in New York City. So, Ed, isn't your prime minister coming to town?
He is. He will be landing shortly, this being Wednesday afternoon, and he will meet Trump tomorrow, as Macron did on Monday, and as Zelensky will on Friday. So it's Europe week in Washington, but it's...
Trump doesn't like Europe so much.
No, it's not happy Europe week at all.
No, Trump's today did you watch his press conference?
I actually had a lunch, so I missed it, but I saw clips later.
I'll get to Rosa's reaction in a second. It was I felt like I had taken peyote, and I've never taken peyote, but it was absolutely Looney Tunes. But in the middle of it, he said the EU was formed to screw the United States.
Yeah. And promised the 25% tariffs. So if there were any sort of residual doubters in any sort of corner of Europe that isn't on the far right, that the continent should follow the German incoming chancellor's advice and aim for strategic independence, they are dwindling by the minute. They're all Gaullists now. Including both parties in Britain. I just hope that Keir Starmer gets through his necessary self-abasement to see if he can get something out of Trump and realize he can't, and get through to the other side and gets a move on, because really time is of the essence here, and Europe has a lot to do if it's going to start to try to speak and act.
Everybody says, the media are pretty dumb, and so they use the same metaphors. Whether one person everybody this week is like, this is Elon Musk's Icarus moment, because they all had to look it up, and now they're using it. With Keir Starmer, everybody's saying it's his Love Actually moment.
Yes, they are. But that's when he disses the president and, breaks up with him, and, all the good folk of London sort of cheer and slap him on the back. I don't think it's going to be that simple. He's still at what I think of as the bringing fruits to the volcano moment, doing what he can to pacify this sort of irrational, dangerous force that is Trump. And like everybody before him, will discover that flattery doesn't get you very far for very long, and Trump will revert, as he did 48 hours after Macron left, to saying 25% tariffs on you, and you were formed to destroy my country. It's so deeply ingrained into how Trump is.
And he went off to, Macron at least had the decency to say, when Trump said, Europe, was getting paid back by Ukraine. Macron said, no, we're not. But he was back on that lie today, too. And he was back on we've paid $350 billion and they've only paid $100 billion, which is a lie. Europe's paid twice as much as we have, or committed twice as much as we have. And we've only committed $120 billion or something like that. But, there were a lot of lies. Did you watch any of this, Rosa?
I did not watch any of this for my mental health. My healthcare practitioners advised against it.
They're now prescribing that you should not.
You had a team working this one, right?
I did.
Yeah. Well, let's give some advice to Keir Starmer and also to Zelensky. because I'm just I don't know how.
The only advice we could give Zelensky is next time try to have a different country.
Yeah, well, that may be some advice, but here's this thing: Zelensky's going to come in, sign this rare earths deal. The rare earths deal is not what Trump says it is. It's not. We get all this stuff in payment for hundreds of billions of dollars. It's more like we'll get some rare earths in exchange for money for rebuilding Ukraine, maybe at some point. But this isn't the point. Trump's going to screw Zelensky no matter whatever he says. Trump's going to do whatever Putin wants. Zelensky's, going to come in just like Keir Starmer's going to come in, and they're going to say, "Hey, how do we get in good with this guy?" And they don't realize we've moved to a different movie.
Yes,
the U.S. is now on Russia's side.
Yes.
I mean, isn't that true? I mean,
it's on Russia's side, except worse. I mean, this is something that always drives me crazy when people describe Trump as transactional. And I used to describe him as transactional, but I was wrong. To be transactional, you still need to be a rational actor, right? You can be a rational actor, be highly transactional, but a rational transactional actor actually recognizes that there is some value in following through on commitments, because you want to get to the next transaction. You are still a repeat player. Even if you're a transactional actor, you're a repeat player. You let people build up some capital. You let people use capital. If you think of The Godfather, right? I'm going to do you a favor. Someday I may come back and ask for one in return. That's transactional, but it's also highly rational. And he remembers the favors that were done. He remembers the favors that he does. And you've got a little bit of favor capital in the bank, or you've got a favor deficit. For Trump, it's all about the now. It's about that instant. You're flattering me right now. I like you right now. You walk out of the room, I forget you. I forget what I said to you. I forget what you said to me. You did something that annoys me. I kick you. There's no rationality to it. It's not transactional, in fact, at all. It's just completely erratic and personality driven.
Yeah, but Ed, Keir Starmer, you used to talk about bringing fruit to the volcano stage. The volcano will remain a volcano after the fruit. He is going to remain untrustworthy, anti-European, pro-Russian, corrupt, et cetera, no matter what happens. And why aren't people getting this message through to the leaders who are coming and paying obeisance to this guy who is who we know? I mean, he's already been president for 4 years. We know what's going on.
A couple of reasons. One is sort of more practical, is that, Europe alone cannot provide a security guarantee to Ukraine. It needs some, at the current state of European capability, it needs some American backup. But I think more practically, the need to be seen to be the rational one, to have gone through all the stages of rejection back home politically, in order to sort of forge that consensus for a break from America. That's a necessary stage to go through, that you were the one who came with fruits to the volcano, and it still spewed lava on you when you turned your back. You've got to go through that process politically in order to, because remember, Europe has been infantilized by the American nuclear umbrella for decades. It's America's taken the decisions. Britain's followed America on every single one, barring Vietnam. The French and Germans have been more sort of a la carte. But basically, all of us have sort of contracted out the bigger security situation to the United States. It takes a while to build the sort of state of mind across a nation to make that kind of break. So I understand why they're going through this obeisance phase first.
Rosa, the Zelensky thing is getting a lot of publicity. But if you listen to Trump today, he was like, Putin's a good guy, and I hate to see these Russian soldiers dying. And we've got to, he'll have to give up something, but I don't know what it is. And it's again, it's very clear to me there's been this big sea change. And yet, J.D. Vance stood up at some point and said, well, he's just negotiating. This is just, this is what you want a president to be doing, to be open-minded to this whole thing. And I'm just wondering what you think of all that.
I assume that's a rhetorical question. I don't know if you two saw Trump's Truth Social post this morning with a truly bizarre AI-generated video showing the tragic war-damaged streets of Gaza magically transformed into a stunning beach resort complete with a gold statue of Trump and showers of dollar bills raining down from the sky.
And also Trump Casino in the middle.
And a Trump Casino, which was pretty mind-blowing. I mean, Zelensky best bet at this point is perhaps to convince Trump that, if rescued from the Russians, Ukraine too could be turned into one gigantic resort that Trump would own and operate, and that therefore it would be best not to cede too much to Vladimir Putin, because it might, then it wouldn't be able to turn it into a giant money-making casino. But I mean, look, we are, as you said, we are not in the normal world anymore. And I think that it is stunning to me how difficult it is, obviously not just foreign leaders, but right here in the United States. It's stunning how hard it is, I think, even for many of Trump's longtime critics to fully grasp the degree to which the normal assumptions just do not apply anymore. And people really, I think, cannot grasp that. People keep thinking, well, but they can't do that because that's against the law, or, well, but surely they'll see that that's not in the US's national security interest, or surely they'll see that these two goals are contradictory. That's just not the world he's operating in.
It's not, Ed. I was also struck during his press conference today, which was a cabinet meeting that morphed into an hour and a half long improvisational piece of performance art. It was, bizarre. But one of the things he seems to be proudest of is the gold card, the new Trump gold card, where you could pay $5 million. And he expects companies will pay $5 million so they can get citizenship for smart students to stay. And then he said, if just 1 million people buy these gold cards, then, that'll be, I don't know what he said, $50 trillion, and it'll eliminate our deficit. And I was like, what? I mean, what are we talking about here? And they actually seem, somebody is, and his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, spewed the same kind of thing. They're all like, yeah, we're going to make trillions of dollars, trillions from selling citizenship. And somebody yesterday said to him, well, what if Russian oligarchs buy this? And Trump was like, I've met some Russian oligarchs I like a lot. I mean, it's like,
we had the smarter people, Alphaville at the Financial Times, who are the more geeky, spreadsheety types, in a separate channel. They went into this $500 billion number that keeps recurring. It's not just Trump demanding that off Zelensky. It's the cost of that Masa Son, and Sam Altman promised to build new AI infrastructure was 500.
So did Apple. Apple also promised.
Apple's just said 500 billion is the new Dr. Evil. It's like $1 million. And then, of course, the UN all claps in laughter. But it's clearly the new magic number that gets Trump's attention. 500 billion. So probably he thinks 5 million times 1 million is 500 billion. And it might well be. Don't hold me to laughing at that because I haven't got my calculator. But it's a golden visa. It's not new. I mean, lots of countries have had it. Generally, they tend to be more like Cayman Islands or Cyprus. You do get places like Portugal, but Portugal's pared it down. Canada got rid of theirs. But it's not new. I mean, it's not like he's breaking precedent here. And I imagine you'll get, a few, probably quite a few Russians will be availing of this at the moment the Treasury lifts sanctions on them. But of course, it's complete fantasy to pretend that it's some fiscal solution to America. There's always this magical bullet that Trump finds. His earlier one was, we'll collect so many tariffs that we'll just eliminate the debt and we won't need to tax anybody. I mean, these are all pure fantasy plays. They do not add up in any real world.
Well, in fact, today during this session, which I apparently was the only one to listen to, which speaks well about both of you guys, he said that he was the first person ever to levy tariffs against China, and we collected $800 billion in tariffs from the Chinese. And it was like, well, actually, no, the Chinese didn't pay any of that money, but it doesn't matter. And the press, Rosa, oh my God, they just keep going along with this. And the response of the Trump administration is, oh yeah, could we kick you in the teeth one more time? We'll pick who's going to be the pool reporter. And we're not going to let people who ask questions we don't like in. And the response from the big media today, we had this rousing response from Jeff Bezos, who said, oh yeah, we're not going to have editorials anymore.
Well, we're going to have editorials. They're just going to be editorials that highlight the values of individual freedom and free markets.
Yeah.
Which is code for anything you say, master.
But I mean, you used to write for the Washington Post.
Well, no, I deny all connection to the Washington Post. I mean, it's,
all right. Well, let me put it another way. I used to write
really
for the Washington Post. I mean, it's amazing what's going on here, but the most of the press doesn't cover this at all.
I do feel for our brethren and sistren, is that a word, in the press? Like you two are brethren of the press. Because I do think it's a dilemma, right? That there is on the part of the so-called and much maligned mainstream media some residual attachment, at least, to the notion of objectivity in journalism. And if you are committed to some idea of objectivity and you have grown up within this particular political system, and in the US, this two-party system, you're kind of paralyzed and at a loss when one party just goes completely off the deep end, and indeed the president of the United States and now the government of the United States goes completely off the deep end, because it is a dilemma, right? Because if every single article has a headline that says Trump is insane maniac, or some variant of that, then it's not that interesting for those who agree with you, because they already, they agree with you, and it doesn't persuade anybody who doesn't agree with you already. And in fact, it just makes them think you're biased. And yet, if you do what they're mostly doing, which is then have a bunch of articles that say things like, some concerned that Trump might be, insane maniac, while others say, actually, no, he's not completely insane. Then of course you look like fools too. So I don't quite know. And this is a struggle for me. I wonder how the two of you are thinking about this. It really kind of calls into question, what's the purpose of this enterprise, right? Because it's all premised on this assumption that there is at least some set of people out there who are interested in something called facts, and whose minds might be changed by getting new information and facts. But not only has that probably never been the universe that we've actually lived in, much as we have tried to believe we lived in that universe, it's certainly not the universe that we're living in now. And what do you do about that? I mean, I think the Bezos thing was obviously it's a shameful, embarrassing capitulation. But I confess that if I owned a newspaper right now, I'm not sure what I would be doing. I think I would feel pretty stuck.
Ed, you're a credible journalist. And
incredible journalist, which in this setting is totally consistent with being credible, both credible and incredible.
Oh, he's all those things wrapped up in one remarkable package, but
and good looking too.
Yeah.
He's muscular and lithe. I mean, people talk on.
But Rosa brings up a problem. If Trump does something insane every day, the journalist in you must be tempted to write, well, here's something insane. But your editors and some other voice in you must be going, well, if I write it's insane every day, then I'm just repeating myself where it becomes boring after time. But if you don't write it's insane every day, then you're normalizing the insanity.
Yeah,
so what do you do?
Like, here's an example, what we were just talking about, the $5 million golden visas, or, say the, whatever he called it, the external tariff revenue fund, whatever his tariff collection thing would be, is you report this is what he wants. And then you report what the objective sort of estimates are. And you just calmly point out the discrepancy, which is, wider than the Grand Canyon. And you do it in a sort of, in a tone that is not, morally sort of lathered, or charged. You just do so in a respectful, matter-of-fact way. And there's nothing more devastating than being matter-of-fact. It's much more devastating than howling at the moon. So I think sobriety is actually a sort of hidden weapon. There is a little bit of sort of...
that rules Rosa out right there.
Yes, I think so.
No, quite the contrary. It doesn't rule Rosa out at all. There is some demand on the mainstream media to be, and by the way, I think the New York Times' circulation is double what it was when Trump was first elected. Well, it's not dying or legacy; it's thriving, and we're about 50% higher, or no, maybe 40%. But the idea that we should be performative morally, I think, sort of undercuts the purpose. The purpose is to inform, is to provide ammunition. Look at the number of items Doge has taken down from its website because the New York Times had a team of fact checkers on it, proving that was double counted. That wasn't a saving. That certainly wasn't fraud. That was already cut. And they just eviscerated the whole Doge sort of, counting board. And they took all but 5 items down from dozens. That to me is useful. That's practical. That's what professional, well-resourced organizations can do and should do.
Yeah, Rosa, when I was listening to this thing, I was listening on CNN, and afterwards they brought Daniel Dale, the great Daniel Dale, out, who is the fact checker. And in the course of 3 minutes, he just went, this is a lie, this is a lie, this is a lie, this is the truth, this is a lie, was a lie, And it was really devastating. And when Macron corrected Trump in front of Trump about whether or not the Europeans had loaned money to Ukraine as opposed to giving it to Ukraine, it was incredibly effective. And when the governor of Maine stood up to Trump and said, see you in court, buddy, right to his face, that was very effective. Is that, should we take something away from this, that calling him out in front of him is one of the best? No, you're making a face.
Oh, yeah, I'm making a face. I'm just going to be kind of depressive, and please try to cheer me up, because I don't know what you mean by effective. Effective in the sense that you and I watch that, well, you watch it, as the case may be, and go, yeah, scored a point there. That sure showed him. And if I were watching it, I'm sure I would have the same exact feeling. And so would most of my friends, right? But number one, most Americans aren't watching at all. Number two, if they hear anything about it, they're getting a distorted version that gets filtered through the far right media, which portrays it very differently. And number three, even if they're getting an accurate version because they are actually watching it, they're thinking, oh, what, that little bratty Macron, I don't really believe him. He's probably lying. Or, oh, what, so what, but Donald Trump is still my hero because look, he's owning the libs and so on. So I don't know what effective means anymore. And I think that's a real challenge, right? That we are living in this universe in which approximately half of the population is just in an alternate reality in which information doesn't make a difference, right? And I feel like I'm having this variance of this conversation over and over. This is something we know, right? We know this from study after study done by all the, behavioral economists and psychologists that it's an illusion that new information changes minds. It, in fact, The more educated you are, the evidence suggests that the less likely you are to change your mind when presented with new information. You just double down and you come up with some kind of complicated special pleading to explain why that new information is either incorrect or actually in some bizarre roundabout way proves whatever it was that you originally thought. That people change their minds when those they trust give them information in the right form, but they don't change their minds when those they don't trust give them information, even when it purportedly comes from a neutral source. And we live in a, nobody believes in neutrality anymore either, and that's the dilemma, I think, for the mainstream media. That's the dilemma for all of us, is that we're either not getting to people, we're not getting to the people whose minds we need to change, or we're getting to them, but we're getting to them through media that they don't trust. So they either tune it out or it actually reinforces their pre-existing beliefs. So effective, it's not effective if it just reinforces your pre-existing belief, which is that he's nuts and evil, etc. We believe that, and it's easy to reinforce my belief that that's the case. But it reinforces our beliefs, and it has either no effect or the opposite effect on all the people whose minds we actually need to change.
Well, see, this doesn't bother me because although I've written thousands of articles and columns in my life, my strong belief is no one has ever read any of them. But Ed, on the other hand,
it doesn't trouble you then.
It doesn't trouble me because I just don't, I don't feel anybody's reading.
Ed, but you might hope people
read. But Ed's, people
I'm
are reading.
I'm a reader, David. This is nonsense.
Well, yeah, when I send it to you in a PDF.
And an enthusiastic read. No. That's only.
And I send it, and then you're like, I need the large type PDF.
And I need it in Braille at this rate.
Yeah, but yes, well, exactly. But my point is this. Rosa, in trying to attack Trump, just now attacked you and said, everything you do is useless. Said everything you do is useless and not effective, and there's nothing you can do.
It's not your fault, but
that's not my fault. Although I take it on myself.
Yeah, well, but I mean, the question is, does it make a difference in a society where most of the people aren't paying any attention? If it makes a difference, how does it make a difference? And to make a difference, do you have to, can it not be translated through the media? I mean, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, the House passed a budget resolution by the slimmest of margins. Budget resolution, of course, doesn't mean anything at all. It's just an idea. But within the budget resolution was the idea of cutting $900 billion out of Medicaid. And food stamps, which essentially is going to go across the country and put all these poor people, so they're not going to be able to go to the doctor, they're not going to, get the food they need. Do you have to wait for the shit to hit the fan, for people to feel the pain before we can have a political change? Or does the media have a role in midwifing that?
Yeah, I think Rosa is mostly correct. But I do think, and she's also correct about saying that people won't change their minds until somebody they trust tells them why to change their mind, give them permission to change their mind. And so you don't need to reach everybody. You're never going to reach everybody. You can assume that most people will remain non-reading, low information voters. But if your journalism can, at certain critical points, change key minds, key sort of people in the permission structure who then persuade others, that's a sort of cascading effect. I don't think we're ever going to have mass media again where everybody, is trapped in front of one channel or at least several channels that all have the news, where they're kind of forced to watch the news, and there's the family, has its dinner around the news and then watches something else. That used to be the case.
That's what your family does still, right?
It's at night. We used to all get together for the 9 o'clock news, and then I had to go to bed. So I had an incentive to watch the 9 o'clock news on BBC, because that meant I could stay up till 9:30 as opposed to 9. But that was
we used to watch the news, which was on here at 7 o'clock. But then after that, we got to watch Huckleberry Hound. And so that mostly I was waiting for Huckleberry Hound.
But I guess here's my question, Ed. I mean, do any of us have a theory about those key minds in the permission structure, as you call it, right? How do we know? Are we reaching them? Who are they? Do we think we know who they are? Do we Do we have reason to believe that their minds are changeable? Do we need to have a theory of that?
I think it's very, very ambitious to say you're going to actually reach into minds and change them. You can certainly change decisions. You can embarrass. You can expose. You can certainly alter what governments do on occasion with effective journalism and shining of the light. And that can sort of filter down to changed opinion, yes. But no, there's no sort of epistemological theory for the new completely balkanized structure of media and how you most effectively reach minds, except on the dark side, except on, people who know how to subliminally, maybe we should just all go to Russia and get lessons from them.
So basically, if you play the recording of this podcast backwards, in reverse,
as people very often do, the secret encoded messages that we are injecting into it will be revealed. But meantime, our listeners are being secretly, covertly influenced. I'm not sure what we're influencing them to do exactly, but maybe we should try it. Well, we should. But, the reality is one of the things we'll often talk about is, how the very rich control Trump and control the administration and so forth. And so, the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal and so on, they do reach that audience. They do, and they can say, hey, if he keeps going with these tariffs, the markets are going to fall apart and you're going to lose a ton of money. That can have an effect. Life has meaning, Rosa.
I think it does. I honestly think it does. And I know that, here's an example. Steve Bannon, who I talk to quite a bit, don't agree with a thing. He thinks, well, but as a journalist, I want to know what he's thinking, particularly of Musk. It's extraordinary to agree with him.
It's enjoyable to see them going after each other.
It is bizarre, and I think Musk is winning for the time being on that argument. But I think it's pretty extraordinary that people in Bannon world see the Financial Times essentially as where the globalists gather to hold their cabals, their secret meetings on the op-ed pages of the FT. And the Journal, of course, in a different way is seen. This is read by people whose approbation and money they want and influences them. Then at least indirectly, it is quite influential. I certainly believe that.
By the way, I believe that too. But as we wrap up here with our final 30 seconds, I would like to end every podcast the same way going forward for a while. And it's like the Journal of Atomic Scientists, where they have the doomsday clock. Because, I want to have Rosa's constitutional crisis clock. And, you can tell us exactly how many seconds before midnight we are on the constitutional crisis clock. This week, some of the examples we got are court hearings in which they say, well, I've told you to release those funds. Have you done so? And Trump's lawyers are like, well, I don't know. And the judge is like, I'm really frustrated with this. And Trump's lawyers are sorry. And that may sound like the lawyers are being stupid, but they're ignoring the court.
Some of those poor lawyers are just trying not to get fired. They're the few remaining lawyers in the Justice Department who haven't been fired yet, and they're just sort of hoping they won't get fired, but nobody tells them anything anyway. So there they are, going into court, put in this position where they're attempting to defend something that they neither, in fact, in some cases, want to defend nor know anything about one way or the other, which is a fairly humiliating position. This actually relates to a totally different question, which is a debate that I've long had with friends over. Is it better to stay in or is it better to resign? I myself have mostly been of the view that it is better to resign, because when you find yourself standing there in court attempting to defend the indefensible, you have been co-opted. But I want to reject your "are we in a constitutional crisis yet" frame, David, in part because, as you know, I think it's the asymptote. We're always approaching that axis, but we're never ever going to quite get there. But mainly because I just think it's the wrong frame. It's the wrong question. Our Constitution is a brilliant document. has done a lot of good for the United States and indeed the world. But it is, it is a document that was drawn up more than 200 years ago by flawed human beings who never imagined that it would last this long, and who would be stunned and rolling in their graves if they thought that we were still operating with the same constitution with a few minor modifications so many years later. The equation, and it's a peculiarly American equation of constitutional with all that is just and good, I think is extremely mistaken. And we just as it is entirely possible, reverting to one of my other favorite subjects, policing, for a police officer to completely respect your constitutional rights as they have been interpreted by the United States Supreme Court over the years, and yet still do things that we would probably think were horrifically bad. We should not equate constitutional with good, with healthy, with democracy, with human rights, with the rule of law necessarily. They're not entirely unrelated, but the fact that we might not be, strictly speaking, in a constitutional crisis under the terms of the U.S. Constitution as interpreted by the courts over the years really doesn't tell us a whole lot about whether we have a functioning, healthy, thriving, rights-respecting democracy. So I'm not sure that should be our final 30 seconds ever.
Okay, well, fine. So I made a mistake, but the reality is this:
it was a bad mistake, and
was a bad mistake, and I'm ashamed of it. And when I listen to what you're saying, I come out on both sides because I think, well,
that's
she says that the Constitution is a piece of crap, so therefore we're already in a Constitution.
Not what I said.
Well, sort of.
Ed, you're a subject. Defend the U.S. Constitution, please.
The Constitution is, flawed document. So we're already in a constitutional crisis if our Constitution is flawed. On the other hand, we could say, well, it's not so bad if we're not following the Constitution because it's, piece of shit. So, well, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that and come up with a different 30 seconds to end with. But I'll consult with you guys beforehand so that, after 10 years of doing this, we get the last part right. But for now, all I can do is I say thank you very much again, Rosa, as always.
Wait a minute, you're not going to let Ed defend the Constitution?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ed. How's the Magna Carta doing?
No, I was going to recite Ozymandias, but I haven't Googled it yet, so I can't do it.
Look on my works, ye mighty in despair.
Look on, exactly. Look on this podcast, ye mighty in despair, is what it should say. And we'll launch an Ozymandias podcast sometime soon. By the way, just as a footnote, I just saw before I went on that on his podcast, Don Jr. said, it was such a mistake for the United States to provide arms to Ukraine. The Russians definitely had an advantage. We should have been providing them with arms.
Wait,
and it was like Susan Glasser posted that. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, I don't think people fully realize exactly where we are. Anyway, thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You're all valuable. You're all good people. And we
not all of you.
Not well.
Most of you.
Most of you. Okay. The vast majority of you.
The paying listeners are good people.
They're certainly better.
Steve Bannon, if you're listening, you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Unless you're paying.
Unless you're paying, in which case.
If Steve Bannon is a paying customer, we love him. All right, everybody. Thanks very much. Join us again next week for Deep State Radio. Join us again tomorrow for the show with Norm. Join us every day for our daily. Join us every day for the TNR daily. Join us every week for Scylla Consciousness. Join us every week for AI, Energy, and Climate podcast. In other words, there's a lot going on. Join us for that. Be a member, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.